Well, my friends, I hope you're ready because this is a very special episode, at least it is to me. I've invited over someone from Failbetter Games, a London-based small indie game dev studio made of about 20 people, to talk about Mandrake, their new and upcoming game, which is a big change compared to everything they've released in the past. I've been a huge fan of Failbetter Games' work ever since they released Sunless Sea all those years ago, I think about 15 years ago, and this episode with Chris Gardiner is one to not miss. I hope you enjoy what's to come. Welcome to the Indie Diarist. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, showing the human stories behind indie game development. Today with me is a very special guest, to me at least, because I've been a huge fan of the studio's games for the longest time. It's Chris Gardiner from Failbetter Games, who describes himself as an optimistic and beneficent gentleman on the Failbetter Games website. So I won't say too much about you. I'll just hand it over to you, Chris. Please say a few things about yourself, what you do, where you're based, and if you want to, what you're working on right now.
Sure. So my name's Chris Gardiner. I'm the narrative director at Failbetter Games, who I've been with for getting close to 10 years now, I think. We are a small indie studio. I think we're about 18 people currently, which is kind of a weird size for an indie studio these days. They tend to be either much smaller or quite a lot bigger. And we're quite a kind of narrative heavy studio. Our games put story kind of at the center of them and try to push the story as kind of hard as we can. So we have a larger writing team than is normal for a studio our size. I think we have currently me, Luke, Michael, James, George. I think we currently have 5 full-time writing staff. So yeah, as I say, very unusual. And we are currently working on a game, a raw live stream called Mandrake, which I think we'll talk about later.
Yeah, of course. And even though you say it's unusual, I think it's very much on point for Failbetter Games, because you guys are doing a lot of very narrative games. Very, I think you described Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies back in the day as literary RPGs, which I always found very interesting. So that's and that's also what captured my interest at the time, because it's just the kind of stuff that I like to play. So yeah, but we'll get into that very, very briefly. First, as you know, we have a little prologue segment with some quiz-style music that you will hear live as well, and just try to answer as many questions as possible in about 60 seconds. First thing that comes to your mind. Okay. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it. So I will start. Click on the music while I say the first question. What is the first game you ever fell in love with?
Oh man, probably Pools of Radiance on the Amiga, the old SSI game, Skullbox game.
Right, okay. If you could only play one game for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
Dark Souls, easy.
Okay. If you could be a game character for a day, who would you be?
KVS from Star Wars Outlaws.
All right. Okay. Tell me an underrated game in your opinion.
Oh man, there's so many. Road Warden, which is a great kind of text-based choose-your-own-adventure style game.
Beautiful. Okay, and I think we still have time. Describe your game Mandrake in one word.
One word?
Yeah.
Why did you do this to me? Surprising.
Okay, love that. And do you have a guilty pleasure game, something you love but no isn't perfect?
Oh man, Elite Beat Agent on the Nintendo DS.
Okay, beautiful. And we're at time, actually. I think we covered all of them pretty much. I think I skipped one, which is pitch your game in one sentence, but you kind of did that in the intro anyway, when you talked about Mandrake. So yeah, but now we can relax. We can slow down. It was a very intense 60 seconds, but now we can slow down and we can start talking about your path into game development, how you got to Failbetter Games and such. But with these episodes, I always like to start from the very beginning. So I want to indeed start from the very first thing that you remember that has to do with video games. Like, what was that?
Oh man, my dad was very into Apple computers and Macintosh back when they were first becoming a thing, and he
Mm-hmm.
ran the computer lab at his university, or he helped.
Yeah.
I don't know if he ran it, but he helped organise it anyway, and helped them get in a load of Apples and Macintoshes and stuff. So some of my earliest kind of computer gaming memories are when I was like ill or on school holiday, and I went in with him to work, and he'd sit me in the computer lab, and I'd play games on the Apple IIes first, and then later on the Macintoshes, games like Dark Tower and stuff like that. Yeah.
They're very similar to my first experiences because, well, not my first experiences because my first experiences were with consoles already. I think
Mm,
with PS1 and such. But my dad is also very much into Macintoshes
mm,
and such, and he had, I think it was a G5 at the time that was the line
yeah.
that went around in the 90s. And some of my first games I ever played were on a Mac, which a lot of people at the time, I mean, it was very frowned upon. Like, oh, you game on a Mac, you should get a PC.
Yeah, it
That's
wasn't like the optimal platform
yeah,
for a
yeah.
gamer, really, was it? But it had really interesting stuff. Yeah, that's interesting that neither of us came into it through a more common kind of
Hmm.
Nintendo route or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, at some point, there's always kind of I'd say maybe a switch in the people that I speak to. And when did you realize you wanted to make games rather than just play them? Was there like a aha moment for you?
I think it was probably when Neverwinter Nights came out,
Okay. Uh-huh.
which was a BioWare game. There was an earlier game by the same name, which I haven't played. But the one I was familiar with came after Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2. I think it was originally meant to be almost the next game
Hmm.
in the sequence almost. I think there were originally like loading screens in Baldur's Gate 2 that said you'll be able to export your character into Neverwinter Nights or
Uh,
something, which ended up not being the case. But Neverwinter Nights was fascinating because the the game side of it, the game content that shipped with it was quite rudimentary by the standards of other kind of Bioware
mhm.
RPGs. But what it was this whole toolkit for making a Bioware style RPG, and you could build your own levels, stock them with monsters, do your own dialogue trees, place your own sound effects, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And it was, I think, the most powerful of those we've probably and easily accessible kind of toolkits like that we've ever had, and I think that's reflected in the deranged amount of community content that was made for it, and is I think still being made for it, like
Yeah.
it's still an ongoing concern. But that was fascinating because it just gave you sort of all the tools that they had used to make the Neverwinter Nights campaign,
Mhm.
and let you run with it, and then it just got
Mhm.
flooded with additional kind of community content and
Yeah.
extra models, extra kind of scripts, tons of adventures, all that kind of stuff.
Obviously, yeah, and well, I mean, when you give something in the hands of the community, they will just do wonders with it. They will just go
Yeah,
to town with it. Really,
yeah.
I remember like when I was like I think it was in high school, I believe. I don't
Mm.
remember exactly the time period, but when Little Big Planet came out, another lovely
Yeah.
studio from around where we are, because I'm
Mm,
based in London.
mm,
But when Little Big Planet came out, I remember how nice it was to just go around the community levels and see what people were coming up with. And then Media Molecule came up came out with Dreams. I believe they're working on the next game,
mm.
which I'm very much looking forward to because of this kind of attitude to gaming, which is also, yes, it is an act of play, but also an act of creation in a
Yeah,
way for them,
yeah,
which I
yeah.
think is very, very interesting.
And that when you
Um,
get both of those two things, they just start blurring together because the community will play each other's games,
yeah.
and that informs the
Hmm.
games they make, and you get this incredibly rapid kind of iterative dialogue
Hmm.
happening that's faster than a game development company who have to worry about things like marketability and quality assurance can kind of keep up
Yeah.
with. The stuff the community can pump out very fast is incredible.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's always incredible to witness. But of course, over all this time, you said that you've been at Feel Better for about 10 years. So, in all this time, is there like one big development challenge that pops up to your mind and that you've overcome?
I think there's Mandrake feels like it's full of those at the moment that we're working on,
Okay.
because obviously that's our kind of active project. But I think that one that the biggest one for me is still, so the company is founded on a game called Fallen London, which is a text-based browser RPG set in this uh, Gothic Victorian London that's been stolen and dragged down by bats into this cavern under the earth, a convenient boat ride from hell. And it's very strange and weird. And that's the first game that Failbetter made, and we've been developing it constantly ever since. So now it's over like 4 million words long.
Wow.
It's absolutely vast. And when Fallen London was very young, a number of storylines started. And when you create your character, one of the things you choose is you choose the reason you came to Fallen London. And you choose one of 4 ambitions that what brought you here. Like, one is Nemesis, you're kind of tracking down someone who was responsible for the death of a loved one. One is Heart's Desire, like you've heard of this card game called The Marvelous, and whoever wins it is given their Heart's Desire. So you pick one of those, and that gives you an initial kind of an initial sort of quest line to follow. And the way the ambitions worked was, every now and again, a little bit more ambition content would be sprinkled throughout the game. So you would advance your ambition, and then you would just go and play the game and see what else is there and do other stories and things. And then another bit of the ambition would be added, and you would advance it. And initially, there was no real kind of plan for how these things are going to end or what they're going to look like. Like, they weren't planned out in advance because they were initially open-ended, and the game was being developed as it was running. And I think on the 10th anniversary of Fallen London, our CEO Adam said, "I think we should finish the ambitions." What would that take? And there was this what I can only describe as abject panic from me, because these are storylines that had been running for 10 years.
Yeah.
Delivered in chunks. The previous chunks we'd done had been a huge amount of work. And now we were looking at, what is it going to take to actually conclude them? And like, if you'd been playing this game from the start, you'd been waiting 10 years to find out how these stories would end. Like, that's a lot of expectations. And so the writing team kind of sat down and discussed it and how we were going to do it and what it was going to take. And what it was going to take was an extraordinary amount of work, because some of the stories still had quite a long way to go to reach a satisfying conclusion. And the game had changed a lot in that time as well. It had started out extremely simple, and it had become very expansive and very complex. And what people expected from the stories had changed very much. So what we could deliver in early ambition content was quite simple, quite linear, quite straightforward. And that wasn't the case anymore. It had to be bigger. And these are also the stories where we knew we could allow the player to have more of an impact on the game, the setting of Fallen London. So we ended up writing the conclusions to each of those stories. Some of them were done internally, some of them were done in partnership with very talented freelancers. Emily Short wrote one, and Harry Tufts, who wrote House of Many Doors, wrote another. And we did them one at a time. We didn't try and do them all at once.
Very wise, very wise.
And, rather than just write the conclusion and just unleash it, because it was such a kind of big moment, what we did was release each one in 3 chapters. A bit similar to how Dispatch released its content recently. It was really satisfying that in Dispatch you get an episode every week until they were all done. And what that did was, firstly, it extended the moment, like the period at which these conclusions were going to be spoken about. And be the kind of main topic of conversation in the community, and just gives people a bit of time to sort of play a chunk, think about it, decompress, discuss it with other people, build up expectations for the next chunk, and it also meant that there's probably a more delicate way to say this, but it made people chew their food.
Okay.
Because when you release content in something like Fallen London, which is a bit like an MMO, it's a live game.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people, there's kind of a prestige in racing through and being the first one to get to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily the best way to enjoy like a chunk of content in game that people have spent dozens or hundreds of hours kind of creating.
Yeah.
And that slower pace really changed how they landed and the reception to them, I think.
Of course,
And
yeah.
we released the first one, which was Nemesis, the one where you get your revenge on someone.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of precepts that we had two precepts three precepts actually when we were writing them. One was to pay off everything that had happened in the
Right.
story previously. The second was to give people what they didn't know they want. And the
Okay.
third was to push further than people expected. And so we tried to do that with the first one, with Nemesis, and we released it in its 3 chunks, and it had a very, very good response.
Nice.
People they were surprised, they were enthusiastic, they really enjoyed it. It was really good, and we had this huge wash of relief when people actually enjoyed it and it had worked. We were like,
Obviously.
oh, that's great. And then we realised, crap, now we've got to do this 3 more times because there's 4 ambitions. But we did it over the course of a year or so, and it's still, I think, some of the most satisfying work I've ever.
It does sound like a huge undertaking. Yeah. Especially because, I mean, if you have to pay off everything that happened to the storyline, this has been 10 years in the making. Like,
Yeah.
presumably you have obviously documentation with the major plot points and such, but like still.
I mean, less than you might think. Like, because some of this was written so early in Fallen London's existence, like documentation was sparse on the ground. The priority was getting the game out and getting content out for people to play. And sometimes we'd had like years might go by where we didn't provide any updates to the ambitions, and we hadn't for a long time had any idea how they would end. And then at one point we had one of our writers, Nigel Evans, did a very rough kind of outline of some ways they could go. So we had that. It was very very rough at that point, very kind of hypothetical, because we knew there's still a long way to go. And then after that, I did a more kind of comprehensive bullet point of this is sort of what we expect.
Mm-hmm.
So we had at least something to aim for when it came to write them, but there's still a huge amount of amount of work. And I especially felt for the freelancers who aren't doing this every day, and they had to go back and familiarize themselves with all this stuff.
Yeah,
and then fresh eyes see it, and they
millions of words, millions of words.
Yeah,
I remember looking, and this actually is a nice segue into Mandrake in a few seconds. But like, I remember when I was reading up on Disco Elysium after finishing it, that game is like 1 million at least 1 million words, and I was like, wow, that's a lot. So I can imagine millions and you mentioned like 5 millions, maybe.
I think we're over 4 million now. I don't know.
4 millions, yeah.
Over 4 million.
Wow, that's 4 times the size of Disco Elysium. That's a lot, but it makes sense. I remember playing Fallen in London. I haven't touched it in a long time now. I think it's. I think my ambition was maybe it was Nemesis at the time. I'll have to go and check now because I'm curious, but. But it makes sense. It's a hugely narrative game and such. And with Mandrake, though, you're doing something a little different from what you've been doing so far, because there's a lot more play in it, I suppose. Well, the kind of play, the interactive play. When I say play, I mean character that moves around and has a lot of agency in the world, which in Sunless Sea you had, in Sunless Skies you had, but based on the trailer and what I've seen and what I read so far about Mandrake, it looks like you are turning that up a notch. And also, it's not anymore in the Lovecraftian context, at least from what I've seen so far. So how has it been for you, like kind of doing this switch to an entirely new way?
That's been really interesting. Fallen London is entirely text and kind of dice-based tests and stuff. So the whole game is built on that. Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies have these kind of sort of roguelike-ish sections where you're sailing a boat around on a sea or flying a space train through space and fighting enemies in real time and stuff. But then when you dock at a port, we switch back to a text interface, and that's how the stories work. So they exist with these 2 separate modes, this kind of pure gameplay mode and then this much more heavily narrative mode, and you switch back and forth between them. Mandrake is very different to that. It's being a rural life sim. It relies much more on the play mode and the systems of play.
Yeah.
And the narrative mode is mostly conversations with NPCs, though not entirely. There are some other ways we use text in our game, which I can talk about a bit later. But you'll talk to a character, and then it'll have you can go into a conversation with them. But those narrative chunks are much briefer than they were in the Sunless games, and they have to. In the Sunless games, it was kind of a bit of a. It was often like a bit of a relief. You'd have this sort of harrowing journey to a port, and then you'd arrive at a port, and you could stop and relax, and read a story and play through a story for a bit, and the tension will come down and stuff. I think we tried to make a virtue of the two different modes. In Mandrake, it's different. The story stuff can't distract too much or draw too much attention away from the gameplay. So adjusting to that has been really difficult, and working primarily through dialogue has been very different as well. A lot of our work previously, because we write in text, a lot of it is prose rather than dialogue, and you'll have conversations with characters and everything, but it's still the bedrock is prose. And there is still prose in Mandrake, but much less. It's like where previously I would say we're sort of 70% prose, 30% dialogue, maybe 80-20. Mandrake, it's more like 10% prose, 90% dialogue, maybe 20-80. So that's been a real change, and one of the things that's taken us a lot of time is finding the right amount of emphasis to put on the narrative content. How demanding are we kind of being of people in terms of what we're expecting you to read? Are we asking you to read like 3 paragraphs of text straight after each other, or are we doing something much lighter? And we've tended toward lighter and lighter, while still keeping kind of dashes of prose, which I think is one of our strengths, and we don't want to abandon.
Absolutely.
And while keeping the kind of sense of the sense of narrative that we've always had. Like the conversations aren't they're not purely linear. You get choices in them. They're responsive to things you've already said and done. So they're not like, I'm trying to think of an example, like in a lot of Japanese RPGs, the conversations are basically things you just click through. Whereas ours are more involved in that. We have kind of the character has traits that kind of insert sort of extra commentary on what you're seeing and doing and saying. Your character's background might affect them. The other things your character's done, your relationship with other characters might feed into it. So it's still complex, but it's not as complex as something like our previous game, Mask of the Rose, which was a full visual novel, but incredibly responsive to what the player had done. So finding that balance and getting the two modes to really work seamlessly together without it feeling like a big context switch has been a big kind of challenge for us.
Of course. And there's one thing specifically that I spotted while watching the trailer, which caught my eye, and that's also why I brought up Disco Elysium. I think the style of conversation, like on the side with like a little bit of a gradient, and the choices in there, it feels very Disco Elysium inspired. So was that like an inspiration for you guys?
Disco Elysium is definitely an inspiration. Many of us absolutely adore that game. It's great. We did the vertical bar with dialogue in for Sunless Skies as well, which was pre-Disco Elysium. So that's like a format we're used to. But then we have shifted it over to the right, like in Disco Elysium, because it gives you more real estate to show the actual game screen, and there's so much effort in Mandrake has gone into the visuals and the feel and the tone of the game that we don't want to slap text in front of it all. We want to keep as much of that visible as possible.
And I think, and it already looks fantastic, and I can't wait for it to actually be out, because I would honestly play anything that you guys put out. So I'm sure a lot of your fans feel the same way. So I think obviously with Mandrake, you might be trying to tap into more audiences and more people that don't quite know you yet. But I'm sure that people who love you already are going to be more than happy with the amount of prose that you're putting in Mandrake. So
I hope so. I think there's a big tonal change. As you mentioned, we're
Yeah.
getting away from the kind of Lovecraftish stuff. Fallen London is very kind of gothic and dark. It has a very cynical sense of humor, and the other games in the same setting adhere to that. Mandrake is different. It's not sort of happy sunshine fun all the time. It's like it is a setting that has a horrible apocalypse in its past, that has left its scars and its traumas. It is a place where the night has been prescribed to humans. If you go outside at night with a torch or a lamp, the fire will die because the night doesn't belong to you. And there are other things that live in the night that it is given over to. And there are powers in the world that are not afraid of humans, and that humans have to learn to coexist with or avoid. So it's not like, and the term we've been using for this is fireside menace. So there's a sense of menace, but it's not like it's there trying to kill you right now. It's sort of you're sitting around a campfire, and the bit you're in might be cozy and bright, but there are dark shadows around you, and the night and the forest stretching behind. Yeah.
Yeah, just outside the edge of your view. Yeah, of course. Amazing stuff. And well, I do have some questions from my community that I want to ask you, but maybe in a little bit. I think you mentioned a lot of things about the features and the development, the hardest development challenge and such. I'm also curious about something that has to do more with players. So, like, obviously, your games have been played by thousands, well, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. I'm not quite sure about the numbers, but I suppose they are. And what would you say has been, if you can remember one of the most memorable reactions that someone has had to your game that you remember, to one of your games that you remember?
I think that in all of our games so far, the thing that has surprised us is how enthusiastically players are willing to engage in their own self-destruction and sabotage. So if you put an option in a story that is clearly an incredibly bad idea, and you say this is an incredibly bad idea, nothing will make a certain subset of players hit that button faster. And there was it felt like there was a while in Fallen London where we were sort of almost playing chicken with the players, like, well, if we do this, will you still press the button? And the answer is always yes, they will still press the button. And that's a lot of fun to play with, because obviously a lot of gameplay is about optimizing your performance and your outcomes. But there are players who are completely willing to optimize their destruction and their impediment and their challenges.
Yeah.
And seek out something kind of more punishing or more difficult, or that's just a disastrously bad idea, for the kudos of saying, oh yeah, I did that. That was great. Yeah. And the things they are willing to sacrifice to press that button are incredible, genuinely incredible. You can throw away dozens of hours of play in Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies, and not by accident, but it's very clear this is a really bad idea, and people are still happy to do it.
Yeah, well, they will find any way to make life more difficult for themselves, players. Sometimes I know that. But yeah, okay. Well, believe it or not, we're almost at the end of this lovely chat. But first, I have a nice little playful exercise that I think might be stimulating, and it's something I'm still testing in this new season of the show, but it's been quite fun to do. So if you could, like, pick one of your games, the ones that you worked on throughout the years, like, if you could recreate it using only physical toys instead of virtual elements, how would you do that?
Physical toys, like a board game or something?
Could be anything. Yeah, it could be a board game, could be the physical kind of toys, like if action figures, or it could be a puzzle game of some sort, a puzzle that something like that.
I would love a Sunless Skies board game, I think.
It would be really cool.
Big, lovely map that you can fly around, and little kind of space trade models that you can upgrade, potentially like clip bits on as you get new bits of equipment and stuff. A lovely deck full of cards of like threats and opportunities and complications and everything to randomize all that kind of thing. Ideally, like a board, something like you could move the board wasn't just in one shape. Like you could lay it down in different configurations. Maybe the board itself could be randomized to an extent each time you played.
Nice,
I think it's something
yeah.
like that. And I'm a big board game fan. I'm sitting next to a huge teetering tower of board games that one day is going to
Amazing, yeah.
topple on me and be my death. And
It's-
I'd love a big ridiculous game.
There is one that reminds me of what you're talking. Well, there's a couple that remind me of what you were talking about. There's a very small one that is about space. Now I have it somewhere there, but basically you put together like pieces of a galaxy and connect stars together. I don't know if you know it. I can get it after this call. But there's another one that you probably know. It's Carcassonne. Yeah, obviously, where you basically build things as you go. You build the map as you go. Maybe it could be something like that with pieces of the board that you just put together.
And as you explore, you lay the board. That would be great. Yeah,
that would be really great. Yeah, no, lovely. I would definitely buy something like that. That's for sure. Maybe it can be your project after Mandrake. But yeah,
board game companies, drop us an email.
Yeah, sure, of course. Okay, so now time for some questions from my audience, and then I can ask you the one that I believe is the most important question of the show, but a bit of a teaser for later. So first of all, one of my people asked, how was it for you to press the release game button, if you have any control over that, obviously, maybe final sign off on your very first game ever, and how is it today? What has changed over time?
So when we do this at Failbetter, Failbetter is now a remote company, so we're all remote, but we all get on a call, and then someone is nominated to be the actual button presser. But we all get to kind of take part in the ceremony of it. I think the first time it happened, it's a bit different for me because the first content that we put live of mine was a bit of content in Fallen London. So it wasn't like putting a whole game up at once, but obviously it was a chunk of work that I'd put a lot of effort into. And the interesting thing about Fallen London is you get feedback basically immediately. So you very quickly find out if people like it or don't. And it was deeply nerve-wracking and terrifying. I think now when we put something live, it does just feel like less of a big deal. It's still always a big deal because you've put so much time and effort into it, but you've also you've done a lot of work and preparation in advance. It's not the first time. Almost everyone at Failbetter, it's not going to be the first time that button has been pressed in their company now. And of course, we live in an age where we do get to keep adding content to games and patch them and stuff. We did very extensive extra content for Sunless Skies, for example, to refine it, polish it, expand it, do all sorts of stuff to it. And we added sort of so much to it that was eventually one of the big factors in why we didn't make an expansion for it, that we felt we'd already kind of made lots of the mechanical sort of improvements or refinements or expansions that we would normally have thought was appropriate for an expansion. But it's still always, and it's also all kind of, there's a weird, emotionally, like it's exciting, but also you press the button and it's not like suddenly like fountains of money hit you in the face.
Yeah.
You know, people start ordering it on Steam and stuff, like a bar goes up. So there's often this real kind of come down after you've actually launched. You've been pushing really hard to get this game out. We don't crunch at Failbetter, but it's still really hard work and very intense in the final months. And suddenly that stops, and it's not like you've got nothing to do anymore because you're always onto the next thing, or if you're fixing fixing bugs that have been discovered. Now tens of thousands of people are hitting it all at once. But there often is this weird come down afterwards.
Kind of relief, maybe.
Yeah, it's a little bit relief. It's kind of a little bit disappointment, almost. That something that's been occupying your mind so much for so long is now out there, and it's not that same level of kind of prominence anymore. I don't know. It's weird. But it is. I think it's partly that you've had such kind of. We have very high standards. We have very high ambitions. In terms of like the quality of the work we put out, and once you're no longer having to try and hit that like each day, every day, you're kind of doing different sorts of work in in the wake of the launch, there can be a real deflation. So yeah,
it could be the fact that, and I was watching a video the other day around this topic, the concept of the end of something. Like when you are ending a chapter, then maybe you're a little bit scared for what's about to come, or maybe there's a bit of a relief, but like it's that lead up to the end, and then it happens, and then that's okay,
it
that's
is.
right.
It is a big change of state, and also these days it's not the end, because like I said, 10,000 people hit it. Suddenly you're going to find a load of bugs that, however hard you looked before, you wouldn't have found. You're probably going to do. It's very common that you'll do some post-launch updates. If the stuff you really wanted to get in the game, you couldn't get it in time. Often you might do that as post-launch updates. So the end is also not the end. So which is another thing that kind of punctures that moment. I think it's not over and you're on to something completely different. You're doing sort of more of the same thing, but in a bit of a different way.
I mean, spoken to a lot of developers, they all say the same thing. The week after launch is always the most difficult because of all the bugs and bug fixes and hard fixes they have to push out. Okay, perfect. And then the last question from my audience is, well, a lot of people in my audience actually are game developers themselves, and they do struggle with like creative block or artist block. What would be your advice for getting out of that, if you've ever experienced that yourself?
I think it's difficult because I think it's difficult for different disciplines. Like,
yes, obviously.
So obviously my discipline is primarily writing and narrative.
Yeah, we
so
deal with writer's
I can really
block.
stick to that one. But I think that there's a very cute habit writers have of when like someone asks them, "Oh, where do you get your ideas?" They give a cute, funny answer to it, like, "Oh, I get them from a little shop around the corner," or whatever.
Yeah. But, I go around walks.
Yeah,
I do say that.
If as a writer you can't answer that question, I think you are asking for trouble. If you haven't got a system whereby you can generate new ideas and new material, at some point you're going to have a bad day or a bad week or a bad month or a bad year, and stuff just isn't going to come to you. If you're reliant on stuff coming to you, you can't. That's not actually reliable. That's leaving yourself in the hands of fate. So you need something to you need some process that helps keep you generating material, and that allows you to keep working even if you're not feeling sort of inspired or possessed by the muse or whatever. And for me that's about process. Like, I have quite a specific writing process. I always start by just writing lots of ideas, writing down lots of questions to myself and writing out the answers, and not just sitting and thinking about it, physically writing it out I usually use a digital notepad or a physical notebook. The act of handwriting to me slows my thought down enough that I'm starting to think of the next thought while I'm still writing. It helps it keep flowing. And writing all that stuff out shows me the kind of block of stone that I'm then going to start chipping away at. So my process is very iterative. It's that big mass of stuff, and then interrogating bits of it and drawing stuff out, and then iterating more and more and more, and dividing it up into steps as much as possible, so until I get to the drafting step, and then the redrafting step, and then a polish step, and things, and making it, having those good kind of reliable systems mean I am less reliant on happening to have an idea that day or something. Like that your brain and your body get into this. You've basically programmed yourself to, when you sit down in front of this notebook or whatever, that is the time to start having ideas and doing the work and doing this sort of work. And I think that's my answer to it, is because on Fallen London is always being made. We can't say, oh, we're not going to do anything on Fallen London this month.
Obviously.
Fallen London needs feeding. And our writers on Fallen London, Michael, Luke and James, just don't have the luxury of not feeling like writing anything that week or anything. They just
have to find ideas. So
absolutely. We all have developed these systems that help us be able to keep doing that.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's the old advice of make it exist first, make it
Yes,
perfect
you
later,
need
isn't it?
something. Yeah,
You
you
need
need something
something.
to work from. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Get rid of that blank
absolutely.
page as soon as you can. Yeah,
Hmm.
and that's
Yeah.
something that I was talking to Ariane Macro, one of our artists, recently, and that's the same process she has when she's doing art: is get something on the page as soon as
Yeah.
possible, so you're getting over that initial massive kind of sense of uncertainty.
Yeah, speaking to a lot of creative people over even in my day job and such. I mean,
Mm.
I do feel that a lot of us have the same kind of process. Like,
Mm.
just have something, get rid of the black page, as you
Yeah.
say, and then just refine it later. It's
Mm.
you'll kill
Mm.
your darlings for writers or for anybody in creative arts anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally agree with you there. Right, so I guess it's time for the last chapter of this little interview, and I'd like to ask you, Chris. Why are you a game developer? What drives you forward? What gets you out of bed every day?
Huh. Um, I think it's a bit of a constellation of things. I think one thing is uh, the need to do good work,
Mm,
and Failbetter puts a very high value and a high set of expectations on its writing. So we know as writers there that we are going to be supported in doing our best work.
mm-hmm.
So that's one thing, that like we want to do good work, and we know that we have the support that will allow us to do so. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have that second thing,
Yeah.
it's much more unpleasant. Um, uh, and another thing is the like why games then rather than some other medium, and it really is the partnership with the player, and that sense that the stuff that you're writing, it's not purely for you, it's not to be consumed passively, it's
Mm-hmm.
something that another human being is going to be engaging with actively, and you're sort of hand in hand with them creating their experience, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't um, precisely delineate it for
Mm-hmm.
them. The player has a huge amount of control, um, but you can try and kind of optimize things so that they have whatever they do, they have the kind of best experience possible, which doesn't mean the most successful experience, as we were talking about earlier. Like, if what you want to do is to go down in the blaze of glory, we can try and make that blaze of
Yeah.
glory as hot and as painful as possible. Um, but yeah, that sense of partnership and cooperation and collaboration with the player is something that you just don't get in other mediums,
Mm-hmm.
and it's glorious.
Totally agree, and a lot of other developers think exactly the
Mm.
same way. That the relationship with the players is just something special.
Mm.
So yeah, and last question for me would be: what is your one wish for Mandrake? What would you like it to achieve? What is your vision for what you guys are doing right now?
Man, it'd be great if it made a ton of money. I
Wouldn't
think
it?
I think it's that what we're trying to do with Mandrake is combine the rural life sim mode of play with satisfying characters and story. And rural life sims are often very good at character,
Mm,
but because they're so heavily system based and there's less narrative emphasis, the stories are often kind of simpler than you'd find in other genres, or more linear than you might find in some other genres.
mhm,
And for me, if Mandrake can achieve that balance between the two, where the gameplay feels satisfying and the story feels satisfying, and both those things are elevating the other, that's when I know we'll have succeeded.
okay, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, well, thank you so much, Chris. This has been a
Yeah.
lovely chat and very, very inspiring in a lot of ways. I'm sure my audience will love it too. I guess the last thing from you, it's time for some parting words. Where can other people find you and or Failbetter Games? And if they do, what's the best way to support you right now?
Uh, uh, Failbetter Games, we can be found on Blue Sky. We have an excellent newsletter that's run by our comms director Hannah Flynn, which
Hannah. Hmm.
people who don't even like Failbetter sign up to the newsletter. Like, it's just delightful. Like, as
Yeah.
soon as it arrives in my inbox, I read it every week, and it's just thing about little updates about what the company's up to, but also like stuff that we've been talking about in the office and stuff that's exciting us at the
Hmm.
moment. And there's always just really fascinating stuff in there that I didn't know about just by being part of the company. Um, I'm on Blue Sky under, I think, CH Gardiner, possibly. I don't know.
Hmm.
And you can support us by going and wishlisting Mandrake on Steam, I guess. Yeah,
Yes,
we love
of course.
wishlists. They're great.
Yeah, and of course do that, and do check out all of the other games from Failbetter Games as well while you wait for Mandrake, because they are absolutely amazing. I can testify for that. So, well, obviously I'll have all of these links in the description of the episode and in the show notes so people can find you more easily. But what can I say if not thank you again, Chris, for your time. It was lovely to have you on the show, and wishing you all the best with Mandrake and everything that comes after.
Thank you. It was lovely to talk to you. I really enjoyed it.
Right, my friends, and that's a wrap on another beautiful episode of the Indie Diaries. It's not beautiful because of me, but as usual because of my amazing guests. And what an amazing guest Chris was. Thank you so much, Chris, for wanting to take part. This was a lovely one, and I loved having someone from Failbetter Games to discuss Mandrake and all of your previous games as well in this very first part of 2026. Thank you so much. And listeners, obviously, if you want to support Failbetter Games, and you absolutely should, check out the show notes to find all the different links that Chris mentioned during this last few question in the episode, and all the different ways in which you can support the show as well. If you like what I do, you can go on patreon.com/theindiediaries, check out all of my tiers to gain access to, episodes in advance, videos in advance, and all of that jazz. But obviously, you can also follow me on social media, leave a rating on Spotify. There are a ton of different ways. All of the links are in the show notes and in the description of this very episode. Now, that is it for now, but if you are an indie game developer yourself, please get in touch, because I do have some slots for the rest of 2026, and I would love to tell your story to the world. Until then, I hope you keep developing, keep making amazing games, and I will speak to you in the next Indie Diary. Bye-bye.